This is Orange Nation Overtime with Steve Infanti and Paulie Sibilia.
Welcome, everyone, into Orange Nation Overtime alongside Paulie Sibilia. I'm Steve Infanti, and the big story today was what the big story was last night, which was what the big story was the night before. Calvin Russell did not sign on Wednesday, made everybody wait until Thursday night. He officially did sign with Syracuse, and then we talked about it on the show today, Paulie. Big news for Fran Brown and the Orange, right?
Yeah.
This is one of those that, we've seen them come close before with highly touted recruits, and, maybe there's a last-second flip or the guy doesn't pan out or whatever the case may be, but Calvin Russell seems like the real deal, and he is coming to Syracuse.
Yeah, it's a big thing for Syracuse, especially the way the season ended. The fact that he was able to keep these kids coming here, even with the product we saw, it shows you how good of a recruiter he is.
Yeah, and if you go by 24/7 Sports' recruiting numbers, he's the 23rd ranked player in the class, in the nation. He's a 5-star recruit, and that's the biggest difference, I think, between Fran Brown and what we've seen with coaches prior is that Fran has upgraded the talent here. And you mentioned, he was known as the number one recruiter in the country, and he has backed that up. And while this season did not go well for a number of reasons, and we could debate those reasons, he continues to be a very good recruiter. And, I'll be honest with you, I did not... When he started here, I knew he was a good recruiter. I did not expect the level to which we've seen him raise the talent.
Yeah, I was looking yesterday, and they're seventh in the ACC, which is sadly great for Syracuse.
Yeah, 30th in the country. I mean, that's solid. That's solid. And I know just hearing from Fran the last several weeks, he feels really good about this class. They've got over 24 kids coming in this class. He likes the class that just finished their freshman season, so they'll be sophomores next year. And, of course, he's continued to do well in the transfer portal, and you would expect this offseason is no different. Certainly a good sign for Syracuse moving forward. Their rankings as a class, according to 24/7, right around number 30, as I mentioned. They were 35th last year, and if you look at the year before under Dino, they were 88th. So they went from 88th to essentially around the top 40 in both years, back-to-back years under Fran Brown, and that's a big difference.
Now you got to see these players develop.
Yes. The other big football story that we're kind of keeping a close eye on as we're recording this show today, Elijah Robinson, the defensive coordinator for the Orange. He was demoted to co-defensive coordinator earlier in the week, still the defensive line coach at Syracuse. Lane Kiffin and LSU, they're after him, and according to reports, he's down in Baton Rouge at LSU as we speak, and this is something to certainly keep our eye on.
That would be a significant loss, Steve. He's a great recruiter. It's, you may not have been a fan of his defensive coordinator work, but he's a great defensive line coach, and recruiting is his best forte, and Coach Brown seems to think he's going to be a head coach someday. It would be a tough loss to lose him.
It would be. And people are saying, well, why would he take that? It's a lateral move because they just want him as the defensive line coach as well. It is the SEC. I'm sure it's probably more money. It's a chance to chase a national title, maybe a chance at a fresh start after things didn't go here the way that he wanted them to this season and ended up getting demoted. So we'll keep our eye on this. But we know that Fran and him are as tight can be. So, maybe he does end up staying. But you're right. It would be a significant loss, especially in the recruiting side of things. As for this basketball team, we had Wes Durham on the show today, and we talked a lot of basketball with him. They've got a week off now for final exams. It does seem like a good time for them to catch their breath, though, after this 4-game stretch that was so grueling. They're out in Vegas. They come back home. They played essentially 4 top 20 teams in the span of a week. I think this week off probably comes at a good time.
Yeah, and ideally it's enough time to get Donnie Freeman back. Like, you're hoping that he is able to get back in this 4-game stretch before the conference starts, and he can just get rolling with this team.
Yeah, and the good news is we did ask Adrian Autry the other day if he anticipated Donnie Freeman will get back to 100% this season. We asked him, will he be back at 100%, or is this something that's going to linger? He seemed to think that, from what he's been told from doctors, that when he is 100% healthy, he will stay 100% healthy. This isn't a case of something that's going to nag him throughout the season. So hopefully that's the case, and that would certainly be good news. It does sound like he's getting closer to return. returning. As we mentioned, we did have Wes Durham on our show today on the Orange Nation radio show. He was on the call for Syracuse, Tennessee, inside the Dome earlier in the week, and Paulie actually led him off for this interview, and he asked him about that Tennessee win and how he perceives SU's NCAA tournament resume at this point.
I'm going to give you guys, now here's breaking news. You're not going to have to worry about anybody criticizing your strength of schedule.
Right.
I mean, that's not going to be a problem. I was mildly pleased the other night because what I saw in Vegas, even though they didn't win there, I thought was encouraging enough to build on. And I would think if I'm a Syracuse fan of any kind of standard or ilk that I came away from Tuesday night thinking, you know what? This is a win that they can use in a lot of positive ways and build on till they get to the ACC. And now all of a sudden, the whole dynamic of who you are changed the other night. And it was funny because I talked to, you guys know Brendan Marks that writes for The Athletic. I'm sure he's been on your show.
Yep.
Brendan is terrific. And we were talking about almost every team in the ACC yesterday in a conversation. And he said, well, Syracuse's whole dynamic changed Tuesday night. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Now, some of that has to be, it's like the old golf game skins, right, where you got to validate. Like if you make a birdie and win a hole, you got to validate it on the next hole, right? So here's kind of where the onus falls back on what your bigger picture question is, Paulie. If this team is who we think it is, then what is it, St. Joe's on the 11th in a week from last night or something?
That's right.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, so St. Joe's next Thursday night, you got to win the game. You see what I mean? You can't have like when you beat a top 25 team at home and get a quad one win, and it's your best win in a really good schedule strength, as we said a moment ago, you got to build on it. And I think that's the next challenge this team has. And look, Donnie Freeman gets back in the lineup. You know you're a better basketball team with Donnie Freeman than when you are without him. And yet without him, I was encouraged the other night. I thought that second half was really, really good and showed kind of what Red and his staff are trying to build with this group.
What do you make of Syracuse's defense? It's something that is really different from Syracuse fans, what they're used to.
Oh yeah, I mean, come on. I mean, you went 40-some years. I mean, you know, that's a generation and a half of people that only knew the zone. And so, yeah, when they go match and things like that, and Dennis said it the other night, I mean, they picked up a little bit three-quarter court, full court press a couple times, right? I mean, stuff like that, that's in the evolution of the game. And for me, I'm not criticizing Jim in any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't do that. The guy's forgotten more basketball than I know. But
you can feel free to if you'd like.
Well, I don't want to join the long and distinguished list of people who've criticized Boeheim. You know, look, I think you're seeing a team and a program to a degree that is trying to play to its strengths. And, you know, I liked what I saw offensively the other night. Now, there's some bumps with everybody because all these teams are new every year, and that's just the way college basketball is. But defensively, I thought they were pretty good. I thought Sadiq White and William Kyle in particular were really good defensively. And that was a awfully encouraging thing for me to see, especially at the post. I thought what Kyle gave you around the basket the other night was really important.
Yeah, he's been a difference maker on both ends of the court. You know, it's certainly a big win for the program, that victory over Tennessee. It's a big win for Adrian Autry, let's be honest. And, you know, year three under Adrian, and, you know, some fans have been getting on him, you know, certainly in the offseason, and it felt like a make or break year. My question to you about Red is, have you noticed any difference in him and his coaching style from years 1 and 2 to what we're seeing in year 3? Or is it a case of it was kind of there all along and he's got a lot more talent to work with this year?
Well, first of all, he'd never been a head coach before, right, Steve?
Right.
That's
Correct.
number one. So, it's funny, I just had this conversation with John Shire in October in a piece that's going to air, I think, sometime in January or February, in one of our conversations things we're doing for ACC Network. I look at those guys that move that chair over, and nobody really understands that transition until you go through it. So there are a lot of things that have to, number one, you become the CEO. You're no longer like the vice president of development or the vice president of finance or whatever. You're now the guy that runs the company. And so you have to do a lot of things. One, you have to learn to be a good delegator. You have to be a listener. You have to find consensus and discussion. And more importantly, you have to find your own voice as a head coach. because his voice as an assistant to Jim Boeheim was different than his voice as an assistant to Seth Greenberg, and now certainly as the head coach. And the other night, we came out of our pre-game meeting with him, Dennis and I I thought to myself, you know what, Steve, it's interesting you're asking the question, because I told Dennis, I said, for the first time, it felt like he'd kind of had his voice about who his team was.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that really impressed me. And I like the guy a ton. I know a lot of people like Red, and he's, one of the great players in program history, and a leader and things like that. But I was really proud and happy for him to watch his team play the other night, and was hopeful that they'd have a good game, and they did.
You mentioned the people moving over a chair. It's not just moving over a chair. The guys that did it in the ACC are replacing, Coach K, Roy Williams, and Jim Boeheim.
Yeah, and look at those three guys in that they all played at those schools for those coaches.
Right.
I mean, you start thinking about that now. Load that up in the gun to go with everything else. I mean, you want to keep everybody. We got to have somebody played here, because nobody understands the place like people that played here. And, Hubert Davis probably was not the first name on a lot of lists. John Shire may not have been the first name on the list for Kay. And, Red may have not been the first list for Jim. But that's the way it worked out at those places. And to a degree, I don't disagree with the hires that each AD made, because you have to understand the fabric of the program. And in Hubert's case, he is incredibly deliberate about Carolina people being in the Carolina basketball program. And Hubert had to overcome the fact that some of these guys are not necessarily playing for the name on the front of the jersey. I mean, college basketball has kind of become, very centralized in some respects to dollars and cents, right, guys? And, so Hubert had to understand, and he and I talked about it in the piece that ran, right before the season started. I got to know who you are. And he said, that's my challenge. I got to get over the fact that, this is a different time and space, but you can still have some old school values. I think Red had a lot of those. I think John Shire has a lot of those. And it's going to be fun to watch these teams. Now, you know where Duke is, you know where Carolina is, and I think we're going to find out where Syracuse is. I mean, I'll be back up there New Year's Eve for the Clemson game, and I'm kind of excited to see the game, because I thought Clemson showed themselves pretty well the other night, and I lost Alabama and Tuscaloosa. So, we're on a pretty good setup for the first weekend of the conference for sure with those two.
You talked about most people are worried about college football right now. So let's just touch on college football for a moment, if we could, while we still have you. The ACC title game is obviously a mess. It's been well documented the last couple of weeks, sure, with Duke finding a way to get into the ACC title game. Do you think the conference moving forward, the simple solution would be, highest ranked team wins the tiebreaker, and now you got Miami against Virginia instead of Duke against Virginia. Do you think they will make that change moving forward, given what happened this year with the 6-way tie?
I hope so. Now, when they wrote this, I went back and talked to some of the people involved to make sure I had my, timeline right. They put the tiebreaker in May of 23. That's when the football coaches and the ADs met at the spring meetings, and then it was announced in early September of 23, right? Well, what else happened in early September of 23? We added 3 more schools to the league, right?
Right.
So that tiebreaker policy has kind of withstood the expansion of 3 more football teams to make it 17. Look, there are other leagues. Now, there are other Power 4 leagues that have similar tiebreakers, guys. So it's not like the ACC is this outcast. The ACC situation nationally has been regarded as chaotic, and some of it is. There's no question about that. Manny Diaz has tried to defend Duke, and rightly so. If I were Manny, I'd be trying to defend my program too, playing in the championship. And the losses they've taken have all been to teams that have had good years, but they've taken 3 losses in the non-conference. For me, I think the ACC has to redo the tie-breaking scenario. I think, Steve, to your point, it has to be head-to-head, 1, and then 2 is the college football playoff ranking. If we're going to have the expanded field, we might as well use it as our strength, right?
Yeah, right.
And just help let it break the ties for us. And I think the other thing, too, is, and my friend David Pollack put this out on social media the other day, the mission of the college football playoff has to be clearly transparent to the public, and I'm not sure it is right now, because the mission is to pick the 12 best teams, not justify 12 teams going. And I've heard more justification by the committee in 3 weeks than I care to at this point. And I'm concerned that the committee itself is not living up to the mission that was originally put forth. They act like they are, but I'm hearing more, well, this team did this and we think this, or we're justified. No, you're not putting the best teams in. We've all got numbers, and I'm sure you guys have seen them too. Miami deserves to be in. Notre Dame deserves to be in. They both deserve to be in. If Texas Tech beats BYU senseless tomorrow, I think both are going. I mean, I really do. And, if Alabama loses to Georgia, hey, Alabama, I'm sorry. I think we pulled this event off without you last year, and we're getting ready to do it again. Just because you're by God Alabama doesn't mean you have the carte blanche birthright to go every year. I'm sorry. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, we played it without Notre Dame for several years. I think we can play it without Alabama. So, and they don't want to hear that. And the SEC wants to be the king of they want to be the king of the hill every year, and I understand that. But in certain cases, you're not going to get everything you want in the way this works out. And I think the ACC deserves a spot at the table, whether it's Miami or Virginia or both tomorrow afternoon or Sunday when they name them at noon, I guess.
What happens if they don't get that spot at the table, Wes?
Paulie, I don't know. It's going to be a long recovery, and it's going to take some national rehabilitation by the ACC. And the league is going to have to do it. It's not going to have to be. I mean, the coaches are already aware. I would tell everybody to look at David Hale's article today on ESPN.com. It's a really, really thoughtful process, and I think it's been retweeted by several people too. But it's a really, really thoughtful article on and incredibly well reported on his part from athletic directors and former coaches and people about where the ACC is with football, the funding in the sport across the board, and now if this happens, what does it mean? And it's not good. It's not good at all. And a lot of people are going to be brought to the forefront on why this happened. And, there'll be some ramifications to it, I'm sure. I'll be as interested as anybody else to see what they are.
Wes, real quick, I just want to get your thoughts on Fran Brown and the Orange as we wrap things up here. This season went south in a hurry after Steve Angeli got hurt. How much of it do you pin on that injury? How much of it was other stuff in your mind?
I had them twice. Obviously, the Duke game at home, and then on the road at SMU. I understand the dynamics of the Angeli injury, Steve, but it can't be all that.
Right.
What happened there can't be just Steve Angeli going down with an injury. And let me be the first to say, and Paulie, you've heard me say this before, I don't know who is good in recruiting or not. I've never followed recruiting because I got a piece of advice a long time ago that if somebody finds out you follow recruiting, they'll bug you about it 300 days a year. So whether they had a good recruiting class or not, I'll leave that up to like Tom Luganbill and Craig Harvard and people like that. For me, I feel like Fran's team was close. I think they had plenty of offensive talent. I think they had defensive talent. Why they didn't connect, they know better than anybody else. Some of it may have been injury. Certainly Angeli's was the highest profile of those. But they had too much talent to have that kind of record at the end. And certainly at the end of the year to have the kind of loss they had last Saturday. I thought that game was going to be close, and to see what the number was at the end, to be honest with you, I was pretty shocked at the final score against BC.
Again, that was Wes Durham on the Orange Nation radio show earlier today. We finished the conversation, of course, talking football, and you know how I feel about the Steve Angeli thing. I do think that is at the top of the list, why the season went south from there. It's certainly not the only reason. I agree with Wes. I'd love to hear more about what people think the reasons are, right? I mean, it's hard to put your finger on. It's hard to explain how the season got away from him to the degree in which it did. Not so much the losing streak because Steve Angeli was out, and I get that, but what else happened that led to, as you said, the disaster at the end of the season?
Yeah, it was weird to watch because you were told there was a lot of talent, but the product didn't get better. And that's troublesome, and you hope that's a one-time thing where the product needs to get better as the year goes on.
Yeah, and we saw Fran Brown go full youth movement at the end of the year. He went with the young guys, getting them experience. Hopefully that experience pays off in 2026. We'll certainly find out, come next fall. We continue the college football talk with our next guest, Aaron Solomon, Chief Strategy Officer at Amplify. He is, can I say he's the most, one of the most intelligent guests that we have on our show on a regular basis.
Compared to the host, though, not even close.
I knew something like that was coming. He knows everything about everything, it feels like. And so we led him off talking about the big news of the week. Lane Kiffin, the decision to go to LSU, the massive contract that they signed him to. Here's Aaron Solomon on the Lane Kiffin story.
Something that hasn't been said enough over the past week is that Lane Kiffin seems to be a truly abysmal human being. And here's why I got to say this. I can say this because I don't work for ESPN. Here's the thing. The great college football coaches in history saw their role as helping shape the character of young men. From everything that we've learned about Lane Kiffin over the past, let's say, 9 days, he just seems to me like someone that no young football player should ever emulate. So I just need to get that little statement out of the way because I think it's going to help shed light on the rest of the stuff. So, okay, you bring in, by the way, I've been watching this probably closer than any legal analyst in the country. I've been watching this like season 1 of Love is Blind Sweden. So here's the most important part of the contract to me. The numbers are big numbers, there's no doubt. But it's not the $95 million contract that gets me. One of the reasons he got lured to LSU is because they're committing to him a full $25 million a year in quote unquote NIL roster related investments. So first of all, LOL. Secondly, from all of our conversations about NIL from day one, this is going to absolutely kill the whole thing. If we thought we had the wild, wild west before, the fact that Lane Kiffin can go out and buy the exact same team he wants every year, he can buy a new team with $25 million of NIL money, and he's going to start this in January with Ole Miss players, is remarkable and something that we haven't seen to this depth and scope before.
This was the next step, though, right? I mean, like, I feel like you, of all people, you've been kind of ahead of the curve on this. You were probably anticipating that something like this was coming up down the pike, correct?
Yeah, but okay, so I don't want to give myself too much credit. I was anticipating that the wild, wild west would get wilder and wilder, but the fact that you're saying to a coach that you've got $25 million in unrestricted spend. Can we remember for a second why we do NIL? Because we thought that it was horrible in the old days that under the table, Billy Bob from Billy Bob's Ram and Chevrolet would say to a kid, you know what, come play it at State and we're going to get your mama a truck. That's not worse. Like, I don't understand. That was so much better than what's going on now. I think Billy Bob giving away a truck is 100 times better than Lane Kiffin being able to spend $25 million a year poaching players from every other school in the country.
Yeah, I mean, you make a strong case for that. A lot of people have been up in arms about the timing of the decision that, Ole Miss is having its best season ever and he can't stick around to coach the team. He's forced to make this decision because of signing day and whatnot. And so if he's going to leave, he's got to leave before the college football playoff. What do you make of the NCAA's role in this? And do you think that they will ultimately kind of change their calendar around so that players, and in this case, coaches, don't have to make these difficult decisions before the season's even over?
We've known from day one of NIL that the NCAA really doesn't have much of a reason to exist anymore. It's like, a parent saying to their kid, well, no Brussels sprouts for you this week. And the kid's like, I'll survive on cake. Thanks. I think that in practical terms, because there's been so much conversation around the calendar, I like what Rick Pitino said. It would be like coaches in the NCAA basketball having to make decisions right before March Madness. That's kind of absurd. But there's no change that the NCAA is going to make that's going to change the kind of incentivizing of high-level coaches that we've seen. We got to remember something about Kiffin's contract. It is the most absurd contract with LSU that we've ever seen. If he gets fired tomorrow, and it's not for cause. And by the way, I want everybody out there who's not a lawyer to understand that firing a college football coach, quote unquote, for cause is remarkably difficult, almost impossible. Like it would for cause doesn't mean you're a terrible coach and your football team is horrible. That's not what for cause means. If he gets fired tomorrow, he's owed 80% of his contract, which is $72 million. And you ready for this kicker? No duty to mitigate. You know all the other contracts we see, like the Penn State contract, where basically you have to go out and try to find another job, and if you do, they don't owe you that part of the salary. So Penn State's not paying the Virginia Tech salary. Kiffin has no duty to mitigate. He can get himself fired tomorrow, walk away with $72 million.
Yeah. Wow. All right, tell us about this college sports commission that's been in the news, the new enforcement agency of college sports. They wanted all the member schools to sign this agreement that they wouldn't sue or take certain decisions to court moving forward. And then there's been some pushback. Tennessee Attorney General, Texas Tech provided some pushback, and now they've kind of delayed the framework of this whole commission and this agreement. Can you kind of explain what's going on here in layman's terms for us?
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you why this is important. And we talked about this NCAA versus House decision right when it came out. So the reason this is important is because the whole model that came out of this decision in House versus NCAA depends on real enforcement. So if these 68 power schools don't all sign on, then this new College Sports Commission has no real authority. That means that there's no clarity on revenue sharing, no guardrails for NIL, and a return to the wild, wild west that we talked about before. But this is what I want everybody to think about when they read more and more about this. This is really the ultimate question if we cut through all the layers of what's going on. Who's the most powerful? Major college football, the NCAA, Congress, or the courts? And what I've said from day one is when you have to choose between those four, the most powerful is major college football. And we saw it in this. The fact that these major conferences and major schools are basically saying, we know what the courts want and we know what Congress wants, but nah, is where we are today. And that's going to keep this in limbo for a while.
There was Aaron Solomon, one of our regular guests on the Orange Nation radio show, Chief Strategy Officer at Amplify. Good stuff from him, as usual. I do want to give a shout-out to the SU women's basketball team. We didn't have an Orange Nation overtime yesterday following their big win in the ACC-SEC Challenge over Auburn. That's a big win for them. And they got contributions from a variety of players. Dominique Darius, once again, leading the way with 20 points. But other players getting it done. Layla Felia, again, with a big game. So Sophie Burrows not shooting the ball all that well from three, but she still finished with 11 points. Uche Azoje with a career-high 13 rebounds. They get it done in overtime, 66-60 over Auburn. And this women's team could go on a run here. They open up conference play on Sunday against SMU, and then after that, several easier non-conference games to close out, the non-conference schedule. And, they've got the look of a team that is very much improved from last year.
Right, and it looks like Coach Jack also benefited from the NIL improvement at Syracuse, and she did a great job in the portal through the preseason so far, the early season.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, Syracuse at SMU down there in Dallas, 3 p.m. tip on Sunday as they look to keep that momentum going.
You can hear those games on ESPN Radio 97.7, Steve.
That's right. Our good friend Tim Leonard on the call does a great job.
Okay, friend. Good friend's a stretch.
All right, what do you have for us to close out the week?
Steve, tell me this kids show, kicked off the careers of the following people: Morgan Freeman, Rita Moreno, Irene Cara. All got their career starts on this children's show.
You're saying children's show. I'm going to say Sesame Street, but I have no idea. That is just a guess.
Electric Company.
Oh, Electric Company. Yeah. I used to watch that.
There you go. Like, of all the things Morgan Freeman has done, I don't remember him on that, but I used to only watch it because Spider-Man was.
Well, you say he got his start, so was Morgan Freeman was not famous when he was on that show?
It says he launched his career there. So.
How about that? What were the three names?
Rita Moreno and Irene Cara from Fame.
All right, we got to go. We made it to the weekend. I hope you all have a safe, happy, healthy weekend. For Paulie Sibilia, I'm Stephen Fonte. We'll talk to you again on Monday, everybody.
Join News Channel 9 for A Christmas Wish and help us support the rescue mission. A Movie with a Mission, this Sunday at noon on News Channel 9 and WSYR Plus.